Hello, welcome to our video on the different stages of clay. We're going to talk about clay all the way from slip to a finished product today and all the steps in between. Let's get to it. The wettest form of clay is known as slip. It can look like this or be a little bit less thick than this for certain purposes, but basically it's really watered down clay. Slip can be used for a lot of different things. I use it primarily right now for attaching items on, like if I want to attach a handle or if I want to attach, here I've attached some legs onto the bottom of a piece, or if I want to attach like some kind of emblem, I'll use slip to attach that on. Here's another example where I attached obviously this clay onto that clay, so I would use slip underneath and I would use slip to attach the handles there. Slip is really helpful. It's like glue for clay, but it can also be used inside of a bottle with a nozzle to do some decoration. If you have different colors of clay, you could have a light colored slip or a dark colored slip and put dots on a piece or a swirl on a piece, or give it texture of some kind. Also, slip can be used to do casting because it's thin enough that you could actually pour it into a mold and then pour it back out again. For it to do that, it would have to be even more liquid than this. This is actually thicker than you would use inside of a slip mold. The next phase of clay is what I like to just call ready to use clay. This is clay that came inside the bag. It's ready to be thrown on the wheel or used for hand building. It's very plastic. It's wet. You can move it around. It's definitely ready to use. This is the stage where it comes in the bag, and that's the next phase of clay. When I get clay like that, I tend to store it in the bag and wrap it up tight if I'm not using the full amount so that it doesn't dry out. The next phase is when a pot is leather hard. At this phase, you can touch it. Notice I touched it earlier and left a mark right there. But at this phase, you can touch it and it doesn't really leave a mark. You could flip it upside down and start trimming on it. I'm not keeping this bowl, so I'll show you what else you can do. You can also, at this phase, carve into it. If you're carving shapes or patterns, any kind of texture you're trying to put into a piece, you can do at this phase, and the pot itself will hold its shape. I have it currently on a Hydrobat. This is a good kind of bat where it will actually dry out and I'll be able to pop it off when it fully reaches the leather hard stage, when it's ready to be trimmed. Sorry to interrupt this presentation, but I wanted to show a little bit of a better example of something that is leather hard. When it's leather hard, like this plate that I threw or platter, you can hold it, it maintains its shape, it's ready to be trimmed. So if I grabbed a trimming tool, I could actually break pieces off of this. Okay, so this is a good example of leather hard. Notice the color, it's that gray color. That would be the color of the clay almost when it's throwing, a little bit lighter, but it hasn't started drying yet, really, to the point where there's light portions. So this is an example of leather hard. I actually kept this piece here just to show you the difference between this and this. If you look at these two platters close to each other, first off, this one's quite a bit larger, but this one here, see how it's consistently gray throughout? That one's been drying for 2.5 days. All right, so it's a little bit more dry. It's almost completely dry. When you touch it, it doesn't move. It keeps its form. You can kind of manipulate it a little bit without it breaking, but you don't want to put too much pressure on it because it will definitely still crack. When you touch something at this phase, it's still a little bit cool, and so I know it's not quite bone dry. So this is one of those phases between leather hard and bone dry. And this platter here, like I said, it's got a big crack in it, so I'm going to have to throw this away. But I wanted to keep it for this so that you can see it's dark in the middle and light at the outside. See that? That's because it's drying. A lot happens in these last three phases, a lot of changes between each. You can distinctly see that there are some very big differences between these three phases of clay, which is different than the previous one where it was just drying naturally. This is the phase where it's bone dry. You can see this one, this is a planter, a bonsai tree planter that I'm doing for my niece, and it is bone dry. It's been drying for several days in really dry conditions, and it is ready to be put in the kiln. When I touch it, it's completely room temperature. It will hold its form really well, but you don't want to put a lot of pressure on it still. It's still kind of weak a little bit and still growing in its pottery life. Anyway, after it goes into the kiln, it will come out in this form. And this is a pot that my daughter threw. She probably wouldn't want me showing it. There it is, her initials in there. So this is a pot that she threw when she was first learning pottery, and we've kept it around. And this one here was put through the kiln the first time, and you can see it's white. It has this kind of sound to it if you tap against the sides or scratch it. It's completely dried. This one's been put through the kiln one time, and this phase is called bisqued or bisque fired. This is the phase where it's ready to get glaze put on it. It's completely dried. It's gone through the kiln the first time. After we have the bisque fired piece, we actually glaze it and then put it through the kiln another time for our final glazed piece. And you can see that that's where you normally see pottery, our finished product. So there's a finished glazed piece. We have our bisqued work that's bone dry and ready to go into the kiln. Then we have different phases of drying where we get it almost bone dry but not quite. It's still a little cool to the touch. This where you've got darker patches that you know are still wet, and it's definitely cooler when you touch that. All the way back here to our leather hard phase where it's a very dark color. You can tell, if I'm going to put that kind of next to those ones, you can tell there's a big difference between the color of these clays. And then we move over to the wettest stages of clay where we've got our plastic phase where it's ready to use clay. And of course, we have our slip here. Those are the major stages of clay between slip and a finished product. I hope that video was helpful for you. Definitely subscribe to see some more lessons about pottery from the very basics all the way up to some more advanced stuff. I hope the video was helpful for you. Have a wonderful day.